I audited 31 companies in 4 years. Every single one thought they were untouchable. Every single one was wrong. That's what I do. I'm a forensic accountant. I find the numbers people hide, and I make them talk. My own family didn't know that about me. Or maybe they knew and just didn't care. Either way, the morning my niece stood alone on that stage scanning the audience for familiar faces and found none, was the morning everything changed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My brother-in-law's name is Conrad. My sister is Faye. They met when we were all still young enough to think money was something other people worried about. And then Conrad started a landscaping company, and then the company became a chain. And then the chain became something with investors and quarterly reports, and a name printed on the side of 47 trucks. Good for them. I meant that sincerely. I work with numbers. I understand what it takes to build something real. The problem wasn't the money. The problem was what the money did to my parents. My mother and father are the kind of people who love loudly and publicly and almost always in the direction of whoever is most impressive at any given moment. When I was 12 and won a regional math competition, my dad framed the certificate. When I was 22 and passed my CPA exam on the first attempt, my mother said, "That's wonderful, honey," and then spent the next 40 minutes telling me about Conrad's newest contract. I learned to be quiet about my accomplishments. I learned to work in the background. That is, actually a useful skill in forensic accounting. You don't want the subject to know you're looking. Faye got married in a venue that cost more than my first car. Conrad's parents flew in from 3 different states. My parents gave a toast that lasted 11 minutes and mentioned Conrad's company revenue twice. I sat at the head table and smiled and drank my champagne and thought, this is fine. This is just how it is. My daughter's name is Sienna. She was 6 years old when this story starts. Her father and I separated when she was 2. It was mutual, it was quiet, it was the right decision, and I will not say another word about it except this. I have raised her alone, and she is the single best thing in my life, and I would set the world on fire before I let someone make her feel small. Sienna had been taking dance since she was 4, not competitive, not intense, just a Tuesday-Thursday class at the studio down the street from our apartment. She loved it. She loved the shoes, she loved the music, she loved the way her teacher Miss Patrice said her name when she got a combination right. Good, Sienna. Just like that. The spring recital was May 14th. She had been talking about it since February. She made a list of everyone she wanted to invite. She sat at our kitchen table with a purple marker and her best handwriting. Still a little crooked. Still the most beautiful handwriting I'd ever seen. And wrote out, Mom, Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt Faye, Uncle Conrad. And then she drew a small flower next to each name because she said it would make the invitation more official. I mailed them 6 weeks early. I followed up with a text. I followed up with a text. I followed up again 3 weeks out. My mother said, "We'll be there, sweetheart." Conrad's company was throwing a launch party that same evening. A new service line, commercial contracts, something with sprinkler systems and municipal landscaping bids. There would be a dinner. There would be speeches. There were clients Conrad had been courting for 18 months. My mother called me the Tuesday before the recital. I remember exactly where I was. Parked outside the grocery store, windows down, the end of a long day. "Sweetheart, I have to tell you something." I knew before she finished the sentence. "The thing is, Conrad's event, Mom, it only happens once, and Sienna's recital, there'll be others. She's 6. This is her first one." Silence. "Your father and I talked about it, and we really think it's important to support the whole family. Conrad has worked so hard, and Faye really needs us there." I sat in that parking lot for a long time after we hung up. The groceries could wait. I didn't cry. I've learned not to cry about things I should have seen coming. What I did instead was text Faye, just to confirm, just to give her the chance to say something different. She replied in 4 minutes. "Sorry, sis. You know how these things are. Sienna will understand when she's older." I put my phone in my bag. I went inside and bought the groceries. I came home and made Sienna's favorite dinner. Pasta with butter and a specific ratio of Parmesan she had strong opinions about. And I watched her tell me about the combination she'd finally gotten right in rehearsal, and I smiled and I thought, she doesn't know yet, let her have tonight. The morning of the recital, I drove to an ATM. I took out $1, a single, crisp dollar bill. I put it in a card, one of those small gift cards with a little envelope, and I wrote inside, with love and family support, just as promised. I mailed it to my parents' house, not to hurt them. Not as a scene, as a record, as the kind of quiet, precise notation that means something later even when it means nothing now. Then I went home and helped Sienna get into her costume, pale pink, with a little gold trim on the collar, and I did her hair in the bun Miss Patrice had shown us, and I took approximately 40 photographs in our hallway, and we drove to the studio. We got there early. I picked 2 seats near the aisle, center section, good sightlines. I put my bag on the seat next to me. I kept looking at the door. 40 minutes later, the lights went down. The seat next to me was still empty. Sienna's class was third. She came out with 7 other kids, all of them in the same pale pink, and she found me in the dark immediately. Kids always find their person, and she waved. Then she looked at the seat beside me. Then she looked at the seat beside me. Then she looked back at me. She didn't say anything. She was 6 years old and she didn't say anything because she already understood that the answer to the question she wanted to ask was one she didn't want to hear out loud. That look on her face. I've testified in federal court. I've sat across from CFOs who were watching their careers end in real time. I've delivered findings that sent people to prison. I have a high tolerance for difficult moments. That look on her face nearly broke me in half. She danced beautifully. She hit every combination. When she came out for the bow, I was on my feet before anyone else. In the car on the way home, she asked very quietly, "Did something happen to Grandma and Grandpa?" "No, baby. They had another thing tonight." She was quiet for a moment. Was it more important? I looked at her in the rearview mirror. 6 years old, pink costume, gold trim. "No," I said. "Nothing is more important than you." She looked out the window and didn't say anything else. I didn't make a scene. I didn't call my mother screaming. I didn't send a long text at midnight. I went home, I got Sienna into bed, I read her 2 chapters of the book we were working through, and after she was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, and I did what I always do when I need to think clearly. I opened a spreadsheet. I started a column for every time my parents had chosen Conrad's events over Sienna's. The recital. The kindergarten graduation. They were at a charity dinner with Faye and Conrad and said they'd try to make it and didn't. The birthday party 2 years ago when they arrived 90 minutes late because they'd stopped at Conrad's warehouse to see the new equipment. The column was longer than I expected. The next column was for financial favors. The $8,000 my father had quietly given Conrad's company in its early days. I found out by accident, through a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. The way my parents had co-signed one of Conrad's early equipment loans. The use of my parents' lake house, rent-free, for 6 weeks one summer while Conrad hosted client meetings there. I wasn't entitled to any of that money. I never asked for any of it. But I had also never been offered any of it. And I had struggled, genuinely struggled, through the first 2 years of raising Sienna alone. I wasn't angry about the money. I was building a picture. Here's the thing about working in forensic accounting. You develop a sense for when something is about to go wrong. It's not psychic. It's pattern recognition. You see enough businesses in the pre-collapse stage that you start to recognize the signs. The overextension, the quiet cash flow problems, the confidence that outpaces the fundamentals. Conrad's company had been showing those signs for about 8 months. I hadn't said anything. It wasn't my business, and they hadn't asked, and I had learned to keep my expertise to myself when it came to this family. Then, in July, 2 months after the recital, my mother called again. "We need to talk to you about something." She and my father came to my apartment on a Sunday morning. Conrad was in trouble. The new commercial division had overextended. He had taken on contracts he couldn't staff. 3 major clients were threatening to walk. He needed a bridge loan to cover payroll while he restructured, and the bank was being difficult, and he needed someone to co-sign. That someone was me. My credit was excellent. My income was documented, consistent, and substantial. I was exactly the kind of cosigner a lender loves. "We know you've always been the responsible one," my mother said, sitting at my kitchen table where Sienna's drawings were still pinned to the corkboard behind her. "That's why we're asking you." I thought about the $1 card. I thought about the empty seat. I thought about Sienna's face in the rearview mirror. "How much?" I asked. 80,000. I was quiet. "Conrad is family," my father said. "Family helps family." I looked at my father. I thought about every time that sentence had moved in only one direction. "I need to see the books," I said. "If I'm going to co-sign anything, I need to review the financials myself." Conrad sent them over the next day. I think he expected me to glance at a summary and sign. Instead, I spent 4 evenings going through everything, every account, every contract, every vendor relationship. What I found was not a cash flow problem. What I found was a pattern of financial misrepresentation, inflated revenue figures in the reports shown to investors, expenses routed through a vendor entity that shared an address with Conrad's personal LLC, payroll records that didn't reconcile with the staffing numbers in the client contracts. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't overextension. This was fraud. I sat with that for a long time. I had a decision to make, a real one, not a simple one. Conrad was my sister's husband. My niece Sienna had cousins through Faye. My parents would never forgive me. But I had also spent 4 years as a forensic accountant. And the thing about that work, the thing that makes it real, makes it matter, is that you cannot see what I had seen and look away. Not because of rules, though there are rules. Because of what it means to know something true and pretend you don't. I did not co-sign the loan. I sent my parents a message that said, "I've reviewed Conrad's financials. I'm not in a position to co-sign. I'd be happy to talk about what I found if Conrad wants to address it directly." My mother called me within the hour. She was not calm. "You're doing this on purpose. You've always resented them." "Mom, I don't want to hear it. You're choosing to let this family fall apart because you're jealous. Your sister has built something real and you cannot stand it." She hung up. My father sent a text that said, "Very disappointed in you. Faye didn't contact me at all. I reported what I'd found to the appropriate regulatory authority. I want to be clear about this. I did not report it out of spite. I reported it because I am a licensed professional, and what I found crossed a line that my license and my conscience would not allow me to ignore. I had no choice, and I want that on the record. The investigation took 4 months. I was not involved in it beyond my initial disclosure. I went to work. I picked Sienna up from school. I made pasta with the correct Parmesan ratio. I did not call my parents. I did not explain myself. I waited. The findings came down in November. Conrad's company was fined significantly. Several investor relationships ended. The commercial division, the whole reason for the launch party, the whole reason my parents missed the recital, was shut down. Conrad was personally liable for a portion of the misrepresented investor funds. He didn't go to prison. That's not what I wanted, and it's not what happened. But he lost the company's growth, the reputation he'd spent years building, and a significant amount of money. My parents called me when the news broke. My mother's voice was very different from the last time we'd spoken. "Did you know this was going to happen? I found evidence of financial irregularities and I reported them. That's my professional obligation. You destroyed your sister's life." I thought about the seat next to me. The empty seat. "I didn't build the false reports, Mom. I found them." She didn't have an answer for that. Here is the part of the story I didn't expect. In December, the property where Conrad had leased his main commercial office came up for sale. The landlord wanted out quickly, one of those situations where the commercial tenant drama had spooked him and he just wanted the asset off his hands. I had been saving for years. I am good with money in the particular way that people who grew up watching money disappear tend to be good with money. I had enough for a down payment and my credit, as I mentioned, was excellent. I made an offer, it was accepted. I own that property now. I lease it to a physical therapy practice and a small accounting firm, neither of which is connected to Conrad in any way. It generates income. It is an asset that will eventually put Sienna through college. I did not buy it as revenge. I bought it because it was a good investment, and the numbers made sense. That is always why I do anything. My parents reached out in February. Not to apologize, exactly. My parents don't really apologize. They sort of circle around the thing they did until they're close enough to it that everyone agrees to move forward. But my father said he understood now that I hadn't acted out of malice. My mother said she missed Sienna. Sienna, for her part, asked me once if Grandma and Grandpa were coming to her next recital. I said I didn't know yet. She thought about that for a moment. It's okay if they don't, she said. You always come. 7 years old. Still the best thing in my life. I think about the $1 card sometimes. It was such a small thing. A single dollar bill in a little envelope mailed on a Tuesday in May. I didn't send it to start a war. I sent it as a kind of notation, a way of saying I see this clearly even if no one else does. Numbers are like that. They don't argue, they don't get emotional. They just sit there, precise and patient, until someone finally looks at them long enough to understand what they're saying. I built my whole career on that. I built a different kind of life on it too. The recital is in May again. Sienna has been practicing since January. She's in the second level now. More complex combinations, a longer piece, a costume with actual sequins that she has very strong opinions about. I've already blocked the date on my calendar. I will be in the front row. I will be there early. I will take approximately 40 photographs in our hallway. And this time, when she scans the audience from the stage, I want every face she's looking for to be exactly where she expected it to be. That's the whole story. That's all I ever wanted. I've thought a lot about what actually happened here, not the legal part, the human part. Conrad didn't lose his company because I reported him. He lost it because he built it on numbers that weren't true. That's the whole story, really. Everything else. The recital, the zeros check, my mother's phone call, all of it. That was just the context around a structure that was already cracking from the inside. I didn't bring the building down. I just happened to be the one standing close enough to see the cracks clearly and honest enough not to pretend I hadn't. I think about that a lot when people ask me if I regret it, and some people have asked. My mother, in so many words, Faye, not directly, but through the silence between us that lasted almost a year. Even a colleague once said carefully, that must have been a hard call to make, given the family situation. It wasn't, actually. That's the part I struggle to explain. The hard part was the recital. The hard part was watching Sienna scan that audience and find the seat empty. That moment cost me something I didn't get back. The decision to report what I found in Conrad's books, that part was just arithmetic. I knew what I'd seen. I knew what my license required. The equation had one answer. I think there's something in that worth sitting with. The idea that integrity isn't usually dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up quietly in the small decisions, the ones nobody's watching. I'd spent years being precise and honest in my professional work, while simultaneously absorbing the message from my own family that my precision didn't really matter, that my judgment wasn't quite as valuable as Conrad's confidence. That being the responsible one was a compliment that meant you'd be asked to carry weight without being offered a seat at the table. That's the thing about being trusted to be reliable. Sometimes people confuse reliable with available. They think because you've always shown up, you'll always show up, regardless of whether they've shown up for you. It takes a long time to understand that reliability is something you give, not something that can be assumed. Sienna is 7 now. She asked me recently if she could add a new name to her recital invitation list. A friend from school she wanted to invite. She sat at the same kitchen table with a marker, and she made her list. And she drew a small flower next to each name. The same way she did when she was 6. I watched her and I thought, she still believes the people on her list will show up. She still makes the flowers. That's not naivety. That's something harder to build than anything Conrad ever put his name on. That's a kid who has been shown consistently that the person she loves most considers her worth showing up for. I did that. I built that in her. Not with money, not with speeches, not with anything dramatic, just with showing up every single time in the front row, early, with 40 photographs taken in the hallway beforehand. Whatever else happened in the story, I got that part right. And in the end, that's the only column in the spreadsheet that actually matters.